Marcus Thompson stood in his living room holding the hands of three 6-year-old girls who looked identical in every way except the fear in their eyes. Before them, a small memorial table held a photograph of a woman who would never age beyond 36, Natalie Thompson, frozen in a moment of laughter that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The woman who had just walked through the door, the stranger his daughters had asked to pretend to be their mother 4 months ago at a restaurant, now placed white roses beside that photograph with trembling fingers. Elena Richardson's voice came out barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air like smoke from extinguished candles. "Thank you for loving them so well, Natalie. I promise I'll try to honor that." Rose, the middle triplet by 3 minutes, the one who remembered her mother's voice most clearly, let go of her father's hand. The sound that came from her 6-year-old throat carried 2 years of grief compressed into a single word that shattered across the room. "No!" The little girl's face twisted into something Marcus had never seen before, not even at the funeral when 3 tiny caskets sat empty because Lily had insisted Mommy wouldn't want to be in a box. Rose's hands balled into fists at her sides, her entire body shaking. "You're not my mom. You'll never be my mom." She ran. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. Lily and Violet stood frozen, tears streaming down their faces. Elena remained kneeling by the memorial table, her hands still resting on the roses, her own tears falling silent and fast. Marcus felt something inside his chest crack open. Not the clean break of 2 years ago, when the doctor had told him Natalie's brain aneurysm had been catastrophic and instant, but something messier, more complicated. He looked at Elena, at this woman who had folded herself into their broken family with such careful grace, and then at the closed door behind which his daughter was crying for a mother who would never come back. But to understand how they had arrived at this moment, to understand why a stranger would be standing in a dead woman's home on what should have been her 38th birthday, why 3 little girls would dare to ask the impossible, why a man who thought his heart had stopped beating might dare to let it try again, you had to go back 4 months, to a Friday night in January, to a restaurant Marcus couldn't really afford, to a birthday dinner he never should have survived. 4 months earlier, Portland, Oregon, Romano's Italian restaurant, the candles on the small chocolate cake flickered in the warm air, casting shadows across the white tablecloth. Marcus stared at them and tried to remember when birthdays had stopped being celebrations and started being markers of survival. 38 years old, 2 years without Natalie, 730 days of waking up in a bed that felt too large and going to sleep in a silence too complete. Across the table, Lily, Rose, and Violet sat in their Sunday dresses, pastel pink, lavender, and pale yellow, the ones Natalie had bought them for Easter the year she died. They had insisted on wearing them tonight. At 6 years old, they were old enough to understand that Mommy was gone, but young enough to believe that the right dress might somehow make Daddy smile the way he used to. The restaurant hummed with Friday evening noise. Couples celebrating anniversaries, families with grandparents who were still alive. The kind of ordinary happiness that had become unbearable to witness. Marcus had chosen Romano's because it was far enough from their neighborhood in Northeast Portland that he wouldn't run into anyone who knew them. Far enough that he could fall apart without witnesses. The waiter, a college kid with kind eyes who had smiled sympathetically when Marcus requested a table for 4, had already brought the cake, already lit the candles, already asked if Marcus wanted to make a wish. He had nodded, but every wish he could think of involved bringing back the dead, and even 6-year-olds knew that wasn't how wishes worked. "Daddy, are you going to blow out the candles?" Lily's voice cut through the fog in his head. She was the brave one, the one who still asked questions even when she sensed the answers might hurt. Rose sat beside her, quieter, watching Marcus with those eyes that looked too much like Natalie's. Violet fidgeted with her napkin, folding and refolding it into smaller and smaller squares. Her tell when anxiety crept in. The words stuck in Marcus's throat. He managed to force out something that sounded like, "In a minute, sweetheart," but his voice betrayed him halfway through, cracking on the last syllable. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded, too full of people who hadn't lost everything. "I need to use the bathroom." He stood before the girls could respond. Walked through the maze of tables with his vision tunneling, his chest constricting. Found the men's room at the back of the restaurant and locked himself inside a stall where he could grip the cold metal walls and force air into his lungs. 2 years. It had been 2 years since he had woken up at 6 in the morning to find Natalie still asleep beside him. Still and silent. He had touched her shoulder. Cold already, the coroner would tell him later. She had probably died around 3 a.m., a congenital brain aneurysm they never knew existed. Nothing anyone could have done. But in that moment, his hand on her shoulder, he had still believed she was just deeply asleep, had still believed that shaking her gently would bring her back. The memory hit him with the same force it always did. His knees threatened to give out. He leaned against the stall door and listened to the sounds of the restaurant filtering through. Laughter, silverware on plates, the ordinary soundtrack of people who still had futures. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his mother in Seattle. "Happy birthday, honey. Natalie would be so proud of how you're holding it together for the girls." Holding it together. Was that what he was doing? Forcing himself to breathe in a restaurant bathroom while 3 little girls sat alone at a table, waiting for their father to come back, and pretend that 4 people at dinner wasn't supposed to be 5? He splashed cold water on his face, looked at himself in the mirror, the dark circles that had become permanent fixtures, the lines around his eyes that had deepened from smile creases into something harder. 38 years old and he looked 50, felt 100. The job at the distribution center paid $50,000 a year. After taxes, that became $4,200 a month. Rent on their 2-bedroom apartment ate $1,800. Groceries, utilities, after-school care for the girls, it all added up fast. This dinner tonight would cost around $150. 3 days of work. But he had wanted to give them something good. Wanted them to remember that Daddy's birthday could be happy even if Mommy wasn't there to make her famous lemon cake. Marcus dried his face with rough paper towels and forced his shoulders back. Made his expression into something he hoped looked normal. The girls needed him to be strong. They had already lost one parent. They couldn't lose him too, even if the version of him that still existed was just going through the motions. He pushed open the bathroom door and walked back through the restaurant. Past the couple celebrating their anniversary with champagne. Past the family with 3 generations gathered around a table. The grandmother feeding a baby while everyone laughed at something the grandfather said. Past all the evidence that life went on for people who hadn't been catastrophically broken. The birthday cake still sat on the table, candles still burning, but the 3 chairs where his daughters should have been sitting stood empty. Marcus's heart stopped, actually stopped for one impossible second before slamming back into rhythm so hard it hurt. "Girls?" The word came out strangled. His eyes scanned the restaurant, the booths along the wall, the tables near the kitchen, the coat rack by the entrance. They had been right there. He had only been gone 5 minutes, maybe 7. How far could 3 6-year-olds get in 7 minutes? Then he saw them. Not at the table, not at the bathroom, not even heading for the door like he feared. They were standing beside another table across the restaurant, clustered together in their pastel dresses like 3 small flowers, and they were talking to a woman in a black dress, elegant, sitting alone with an untouched glass of wine and a phone face down on the table. A woman Marcus had never seen before in his life. And as he started walking toward them, his feet moving automatically even as his mind raced through apologies he would need to make to whatever stranger his daughters were bothering, he heard Lily's voice. Clear and earnest, carrying across the restaurant with the kind of volume only children who don't yet understand social boundaries can achieve. "Our daddy's birthday is today, but he's really sad because our mommy died." Marcus froze. Blood rushed in his ears. Around him, other diners turned to look. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then Violet's voice, just as clear. "And we thought, maybe if you could pretend to be our mommy, just for tonight." Rose finished the sentence, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Just so he doesn't have to be alone on his birthday. We'll be really good. We won't ask for dessert or anything. We just want Daddy to be happy." The woman they were talking to had long blonde hair that fell past her shoulders. Even sitting down, Marcus could tell she was tall, maybe 5'8" or 5'9". The black dress looked expensive in a way that made Marcus immediately conscious of his off-the-rack button-down and the fact that he had worn the same khakis to work for the past 3 days because laundry kept slipping his mind. But it was her face that stopped him, because she wasn't smiling politely and looking around for an adult to rescue her from this awkward situation. She wasn't standing up to leave. She was looking at his 3 daughters with an expression Marcus recognized instantly because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. Pure, undiluted grief. Tears streamed down her face, not delicate tears, real ones that had broken through whatever dam she had built to hold them back. Her hands trembled as she reached out, then stopped, uncertain, looking at the girls as if they might disappear if she blinked. The word came out barely above a whisper. Marcus was still 10 feet away, but the restaurant had gone so quiet he heard it clearly. "Yes." Then louder, steadier, even as more tears fell. "Yes, I'll pretend." Marcus's feet carried him the rest of the distance on autopilot. He opened his mouth to apologize, to gather his daughters and leave this stranger to her obviously already difficult evening. But then the woman looked up at him. Her eyes were hazel, he noticed distantly, rimmed with red from crying, but still striking. And there was something in them, not pity, not the careful sympathy he had gotten used to from people who knew about Natalie. This was recognition, the kind that only came from shared experience. "I'm sorry." The words finally made it out of Marcus's mouth. "They shouldn't have bothered you. We'll just..." But the woman was standing now. Up close, she was exactly as tall as he'd guessed. The black dress was indeed expensive, probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. But her hands were still shaking, and her makeup was ruined from crying, and she looked at him with those grief-familiar eyes and said words that made no sense. "I'll pretend to be their mom tonight, if you say it's okay." 3 pairs of identical eyes turned to Marcus. Lily's hopeful, Violet's uncertain, Rose's desperate. His daughters, who hadn't asked him for anything since Natalie died, except to know why Mommy couldn't come back, were asking him for this. Asking him to let a stranger sit at their table and play pretend, so that for one night maybe, they could feel like a complete family again. Every logical part of Marcus's brain said no. Every parenting instinct said you don't invite strangers into your children's lives. Every ounce of common sense said this was too weird, too complicated, too much. But then he looked at the woman again, at the tears still falling, at the way she was looking at his daughters like they had just offered her something precious. And he thought about how he had been hiding in a bathroom 5 minutes ago, trying not to fall apart. About how his girls had noticed, had decided to do something about it in the way only 6-year-olds would think was reasonable. The word came out before he could second-guess it. "Okay." The woman's face transformed. Grief didn't disappear. Marcus knew it didn't work that way. Knew it was always there under the surface. But something else broke through. Hope, maybe, or gratitude, or the same desperate desire to believe that tonight could be different that Marcus felt burning in his own chest. She smiled, a real smile that reached her ruined eyes and made her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the expensive dress. "I'm Elena Richardson. Marcus Thompson, and these are Lily, Rose, and Violet." Elena knelt down to the girl's level, which immediately told Marcus more about her than her clothes or car ever could. She took their small hands in hers, gently, carefully, like she understood how fragile they were. "It's very nice to meet you all. Now, Why don't we go back to your table and celebrate your daddy's birthday properly? As they walked back across the restaurant, Elena's hand in Violet's, Marcus carrying Rose while Lily held his other hand, he couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had brought this elegant stranger into their lives at exactly the moment they needed her most. He didn't know yet that Elena had her own reasons for saying yes, that she had been sitting alone at that table, trying to work up the courage to leave her own painful past behind. That three little girls asking her to be their mother for one night would change the trajectory of all their lives in ways none of them could predict. All he knew was that when they reached the table and Elena slid into the empty chair, Natalie's chair, though he tried not to think about it that way, and smiled at him across the birthday cake's flickering candles, something inside his chest that had been frozen solid for 2 years began very slowly to thaw. "Make a wish, Daddy." Lily's voice pulled him back to the moment. The candles were still burning. The cake was still waiting. And for the first time in 2 years, Marcus closed his eyes and wished for something other than the impossible past. He wished for the courage to imagine a future. The dinner that followed felt surreal in the best possible way. Elena played her role with a naturalness that suggested she had thought carefully about how to do this without overstepping. She didn't try to act like Natalie, didn't pretend to know the girls' favorite foods or teachers' names. Instead, she asked questions, real questions, listened to the answers like they mattered. "So you're all in first grade?" Violet nodded enthusiastically, her earlier nervousness forgotten in the face of a sympathetic adult audience. "We're in Mrs. Patterson's class. We sit together because we're triplets, so we have to stay close." Elena's smile widened. "That must be wonderful, having 2 built-in best friends." "Do you have any sisters?" Lily asked, already comfortable enough to turn the conversation around. The smile faltered. Just for a second, just long enough for Marcus to notice. "I had a sister. She passed away when we were young." The table went quiet. Marcus watched his daughters process this information with the peculiar wisdom children sometimes possessed when it came to grief. They understood loss in a way their classmates with living parents didn't yet. Understood that passed away meant gone forever, meant empty spaces that never got filled. Rose, always the most perceptive, always the one who saw through adult pretenses, looked at Elena with those 2 old eyes and asked the question Marcus had been wondering himself. "Is that why you said yes? When we asked you to pretend, because you know what it's like to miss someone?" Elena's eyes glistened. She didn't look away from Rose, didn't soften the truth. "Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly why." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a kind stranger doing a good deed. This was someone who understood their pain from the inside out. Someone who knew that grief wasn't something you got over, but something you learned to carry. The words came out before he could stop them. "How old were you?" Elena took a sip of her wine before answering. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. 12. She was 10. Leukemia. It's been 18 years, but there are still days when I reach for the phone to call her before I remember she's gone. Daddy does that with Natalie. Violet's voice was matter of fact, the way children stated obvious truths without realizing their impact. Sometimes he sets 4 places at the table. Marcus's throat tightened. He hadn't realized the girls had noticed, hadn't realized how many small betrayals of his ongoing grief they had been cataloging. Elena reached across the table, not touching him, just close enough that he could if he wanted to. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had spent years learning how to speak about loss without falling apart. That's not forgetting, that's love. Love doesn't stop just because someone isn't here anymore. The girls nodded solemnly, and Marcus found himself grateful beyond words for this stranger who seemed to know exactly what to say, who understood that acknowledging Natalie wasn't betraying her memory, but honoring it. They talked through the rest of dinner. About school, the girls were learning to read and Lily was already 3 levels ahead. About work, Marcus explained his job managing logistics at a distribution center, trying not to sound defensive about it. Elena shared that she was an architect, that she designed community centers and libraries, spaces where people could feel less alone. The way she said it made Marcus suspect she was talking about more than just buildings. When the waiter brought the check, Elena reached for it. Marcus's pride flared immediately. "Please, you've already done so much." Elena's hand didn't move. Her expression was firm in a way that suggested this mattered to her. "It's your birthday, and these three beautiful girls asked me to be their mother for the evening. Do you know how many mothers pay for their children's birthday dinners?" "All of them." The triplets said it in unison, that eerie twin speak that still happens sometimes, even with three of them. Elena grinned. "Exactly. So I'm paying, and that's final." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he made enough to cover his family's expenses, that he didn't need charity from wealthy strangers in expensive dresses. But something in her expression told him this mattered to her, that being able to do this one small thing was important. "Thank you for everything. You have no idea what this meant to us." Elena's smile was soft. "I think I have some idea." The parking lot was cold when they finally left, the January air biting through Marcus's jacket. The girls were exhausted, leaning against him as they walked to his 10-year-old Honda Civic. Elena walked beside them, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Thank you again." Marcus unlocked the car, helped the girls into their booster seats. "I know this was probably the strangest dinner you've ever had." "Actually," Elena paused, seeming to make a decision, "it was exactly what I needed tonight." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Then the words came out in a rush, like she needed to say them before she lost courage. "I was supposed to be having dinner with my fiancé tonight. Ex-fiancé as of 3 days ago. Brennan was supposed to meet me here to discuss dividing our things, but he texted an hour before to say he wasn't coming. Too painful, apparently." Marcus's eyes widened. "Elena, I'm so sorry. We completely monopolized your evening when you were dealing with—" "No," she cut him off, firm. "You saved my evening. I was sitting at that table feeling sorry for myself, wondering how I'd ended up 30 years old and alone again. And then three little girls reminded me that loneliness is a choice we make, not a sentence we serve." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had been choosing loneliness for 2 years because it was safer, more predictable. Hope required vulnerability, and he'd had enough of being vulnerable to last a lifetime. But tonight, watching a stranger hold his daughter's hands and smile across a birthday cake, something had shifted. For the first time since Natalie died, he'd felt something other than grief. He'd felt possibility. They exchanged numbers. Elena said she'd love to see the girls again if that was okay. Marcus heard himself saying yes before his better judgment could intervene. Then they were driving away, 3 sleepy girls in the back seat, and Marcus was thinking about hazel eyes and the way Elena had knelt down to speak to his daughters at eye level. Sarah would have liked her, he thought, then caught himself. Natalie. Her name was Natalie. He was so tired he was mixing up names. But the thought didn't hurt the way he expected it to. Instead, it felt like permission. 3 days passed. Marcus went through the motions. Work at the distribution center, pick up the girls from school, dinner, homework, bedtime. The girls talked about Elena constantly, asked when they would see their pretend mommy again. Marcus deflected, uncertain. The whole thing had been surreal. Beautiful, but surreal. Maybe it was better to leave it as a perfect, one-night memory rather than risk ruining it with reality. But on the 3rd day, loading groceries into his car after work, curiosity got the better of him. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Elena Richardson, Architect, Portland," into Google. The results loaded immediately. Richardson and Associates, a prominent architecture firm in downtown Portland. Projects worth millions. And there, on the leadership page, was Elena. Not just an architect, director of design. Her biography mentioned degrees from Berkeley, awards from the American Institute of Architects, Community projects across the Pacific Northwest. Marcus's stomach dropped. She wasn't just successful. She was the kind of successful that put her in a completely different tax bracket. The kind of successful that meant her annual income probably matched his salary times 5 or 6. He sat in the parking lot staring at his phone, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy settle over his shoulders. What had he been thinking? That a woman like Elena Richardson would actually be interested in a warehouse manager with 3 kids and a mountain of grief? She had been kind, had done a beautiful thing, but surely that's all it was. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi Marcus, it's Elena. I've been thinking about you and the girls. Would you like to get coffee this weekend? My treat. I promise that's the last time I'll insist on paying for anything. Your pride is showing, and it's very sweet. E." Marcus read the message 3 times. Tried to analyze it for hidden meanings or polite brush-offs. Found neither. Just a straightforward invitation. From a woman who made 10 times his salary, to a man who could barely afford birthday dinners. The smart thing would be to say no, to protect himself and his daughters from the inevitable disappointment when Elena realized what she was getting into. To keep their perfect memory perfect, rather than risk tarnishing it with messy reality. But then he remembered the way she had looked at his daughters, the way she had understood without needing explanation, the way his chest had felt lighter for the first time in 2 years. He typed back, "Powell's Books Cafe, Saturday at 10. The girls would love to see you again." The response came within seconds. "Perfect. See you then." Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Marcus had gotten up early, checked himself in the mirror more times than he cared to admit. He'd gone out Friday night after the girls were asleep and bought a new shirt. Nothing expensive, just something that didn't have factory dust permanently embedded in the fabric. Told himself he wasn't dressing to impress anyone. Told himself this was just coffee with someone who had been kind to his daughters. Powell's Books took up an entire city block in downtown Portland. Marcus had chosen the cafe on the 3rd floor because it was public but not too loud, familiar but not too intimate. A good place for a conversation that might be awkward when reality replaced the magic of that first dinner. They arrived 15 minutes early. The girls bounced with excitement, asking every 30 seconds if Elena was there yet. Marcus bought them hot chocolate and himself a coffee he didn't really want, just to have something to do with his hands. Then Elena walked in. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup that Marcus could see. She looked younger this way, more approachable. Still beautiful, but in a way that didn't make Marcus feel like he was standing next to a magazine cover. The girls saw her first, ran over with the fearlessness of children who hadn't yet learned to doubt that the people they cared about would stay. Elena knelt down, that instinctive gesture again, and let them crash into her for hugs. "I brought you something." She pulled out 3 small wrapped packages from her bag. The girls tore into them with enthusiasm. Books. Classic children's books with beautiful illustrations. Charlotte's Web for Lily, The Secret Garden for Violet, A Little Princess for Rose. Marcus felt his throat tighten. The books were hardcover, probably expensive. But more than that, they were thoughtful, chosen individually. Elena had paid attention during dinner, had remembered which girl was the reader, which one loved gardens, which one carried herself like royalty. They settled at a corner table surrounded by books. The girls immediately opened their gifts, exclaiming over the pictures. Elena ordered coffee, black, no sugar, and a scone she picked at without eating. "Thank you for meeting me," she spoke quietly, conscious of not overwhelming the girls with adult conversation. "I wanted to make sure the other night wasn't too strange, that I didn't overstep." Marcus shook his head. "You didn't. The girls haven't stopped talking about you, about their pretend mommy." Elena laughed. The sound was genuine, unforced. "Is that what they're calling me?" "Among other things. Lily has decided you're a princess, Violet thinks you're a movie star, and Rose is convinced you're secretly a superhero. I like Rose's theory best. They sat there in the bookstore cafe, neither quite sure what to say next, but neither wanting to walk away. The girls provided cover, chattering about school and showing Elena their drawings. But underneath the surface conversation, something else was happening. A tentative reaching across the space between stranger and less stranger. Between broken person and equally broken person. Finally, Marcus asked the question that had been eating at him since he'd Googled her. "Can I ask you something? And please don't take this the wrong way." Elena set down her coffee. Her expression turned serious. "Of course. Why did you really say yes that night? To pretending? A woman like you, successful, beautiful, clearly with her life together. What made you say yes to 3 random kids in a restaurant?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of carefully chosen honesty. "My sister Sophie died when I was 12. She had leukemia. I wasn't a bone marrow match." She paused, collecting herself. "For years I blamed myself. Thought if I had been a match, she'd still be alive. That I'd failed her." Marcus started to interrupt, but Elena held up a hand. "I know now it doesn't work that way, but grief isn't logical. For a long time, I carried this guilt that made me feel like I didn't deserve to be happy. Like being alive when she wasn't was a betrayal." The girls had gone quiet, listening with the intensity children brought to stories about loss. They understood this language. And then 3 little girls asked me to be their mother for one night, and I realized something. Elena's eyes met Marcus's across the table. The best way to honor the people we've lost isn't to stop living. It's to live fully, to love fiercely, to say yes to joy even when grief is sitting right there in the room with us. She turned to look at Lily, Rose, and Violet. "Your girls reminded me how to do that. They gave me permission to be happy again. And so did you." Marcus didn't realize he was crying until Rose reached over and patted his hand. When had his 6-year-old daughter learned to comfort him? When had their roles reversed so completely? Elena pulled napkins from the dispenser and handed them over without comment, without judgment, just understanding. "I should probably tell you something too." Marcus wiped his eyes, grateful the bookstore cafe was mostly empty. "I looked you up online, saw your company, your projects, the awards." Elena's expression didn't change. "And? And I manage a warehouse. I make $50,000 a year before taxes. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Northeast Portland. My car has 160,000 miles on it. I'm not—" He struggled to find the words. "I don't know what you think this is, but I need you to know I'm not the kind of person who can take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive things or fit into your world." Elena reached across the table, didn't grab his hand, just laid hers next to his, close enough that he could take it if he wanted to. "Marcus, I don't care about any of that. My father built his company from nothing. He taught me that money is a tool, not a measure of worth." Her voice was firm. "I dated a man for 3 years who had plenty of money. Brennan came from old Portland wealth. And you know what he couldn't give me? Honesty, vulnerability, real love." She paused. "You gave me more in one dinner at Romano's than he gave me in 3 years." The moment stretched between them. Marcus looked down at her hand, so close to his. Thought about what it would mean to close that distance, to risk this, to let someone in when he'd spent 2 years building walls. Then Rose spoke up, her voice cutting through the adult tension with the bluntness only children could achieve. "Are you going to be our new mommy for real?" Marcus and Elena both froze. Rose continued, oblivious to the enormity of her question. "Because Mommy Natalie said she'd never leave us. But she did. So if you leave too..." Elena turned in her chair, giving Rose her full attention. "I can't promise I'll never leave, Rose. No one can promise that. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes people leave even when they don't want to. but I can promise I'll try my best to stay. Is that enough? Rose looked at Elena with those two old eyes, studied her face like she was searching for lies. Then slowly, she nodded. But Marcus saw it, the doubt, the fear. His daughter didn't believe Elena, couldn't believe her, because the last person who promised to stay had left them anyway. The coffee date wound down. Elena paid before Marcus could protest, slipping her card to the server while he was distracted helping Violet put her new book in her backpack. They walked out into the January afternoon, breath misting in the cold air. "Can we do this again?" Elena asked. The question was directed at all of them, but her eyes were on Marcus. "We'd like that." They stood there on the sidewalk outside Powell's, Marcus with three 6-year-olds holding onto his hands and jacket, Elena with her expensive purse and her grief-familiar eyes. Two broken people wondering if maybe, just maybe, they could help each other find a way to be a little less broken. Elena bent down one more time. "Thank you for asking me to be brave, girls. I'll see you soon." Then she was walking away, disappearing into the Saturday afternoon crowd. Marcus watched her go and felt that unfamiliar sensation in his chest again, the one he'd been trying not to name: hope. Coffee turned into dinner the following week. Marcus chose a casual burger place where the girls could be loud without judgment, and where the bill wouldn't exceed $40. Elena arrived in jeans again, her hair down this time, and ordered a milkshake along with her burger like she'd been doing this with them for years, instead of days. Dinner turned into weekend outings. The Saturday after that, they met at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Elena walked through the exhibits, explaining concepts about space and physics in ways that made Lily's eyes light up, that made Violet ask question after question. Even Rose participated, though she maintained a careful distance, watching Elena with those evaluating eyes. The Saturday after that, Elena came to their apartment for the first time. Marcus had spent the previous evening cleaning frantically, trying to make the cramped two-bedroom look less like a disaster zone, trying to hide the fact that three 6-year-olds and one exhausted father created a level of chaos that defied organization. Elena had walked in, looked around at the drawings taped to every available wall surface, the books stacked on every flat surface, the general evidence of life being actively lived, and smiled. "This is perfect." She helped the girls with their math homework, fractions, which Marcus barely remembered from his own childhood, made dinner alongside Marcus in the tiny galley kitchen, their shoulders bumping as they moved around each other. Spaghetti with marinara sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the grocery store bakery, nothing fancy, nothing that would appear in the kind of restaurants Elena probably frequented. But when they sat down to eat, the 5 of them crowded around a table meant for 4. Elena closed her eyes on the first bite and made a sound of genuine appreciation. "This is delicious." Lily and Violet beamed. Rose ate silently, her eyes moving between Marcus and Elena, calculating something Marcus couldn't decipher. February became a string of these moments, small domestic scenes that felt simultaneously ordinary and miraculous. Elena fitting herself into the spaces of their life with a care that suggested she understood how fragile everything was, how easily it could break. But Marcus noticed the cracks forming, noted that one Sunday evening in late February, after Elena had left and the girls were in bed, Marcus found Rose still awake. She was sitting up in the bed she shared with her sisters, staring at the photo of Natalie they kept on their dresser. "Can't sleep, baby?" Rose shook her head. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "What are you thinking about?" The silence stretched long enough that Marcus thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "If I start loving Miss Elena, does that mean I don't love Mommy anymore?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He pulled Rose into his lap, felt her small body rigid with tension. "No, sweetheart, love doesn't work like that. Your heart is big enough for both. Mommy will always be your mommy. Elena could be..." He struggled to find the right words. "Another kind of person who loves you, if you want, but only if you want. Rose relaxed slightly, but didn't respond, just leaned against Marcus's chest and breathed. I was mean to her yesterday when she tried to help me with my shoes. You weren't mean, you were protecting yourself. That's not wrong. But what if she leaves because I'm not nice enough? What if she doesn't want to be my mommy because I don't want her enough? The fear in Rose's voice made Marcus's chest ache. His daughter, 6 years old, already understood that love could be conditional, that people could leave, that wanting someone to stay wasn't always enough to make them stay. He held her tighter, made a silent promise to himself that if Elena did eventually leave, when she realized that this life, this complicated mess of grief and poverty and 3 traumatized children, wasn't what she wanted, he would make sure Rose knew it wasn't her fault. The next weekend, Elena suggested taking the girls to Disneyland. She brought it up casually over lunch at a food cart pod, like she was proposing a trip to the grocery store rather than a vacation that would cost thousands of dollars. I've never been. Can you believe that? 30 years old and I've never been to Disneyland. I thought maybe we could go during spring break. Make it a whole thing. The girls erupted in excitement. Lily and Violet started talking over each other, listing rides they wanted to go on, characters they wanted to meet. Rose even smiled, a real smile, the first Marcus had seen directed at Elena. But Marcus felt his stomach drop. Spring break was 3 weeks away. A trip to Disneyland, flights, hotel, park tickets, food, would cost at least $2,000. Maybe $3,000, money he absolutely did not have. That's incredibly generous, but Elena's hand moved toward his across the table, not quite touching. I want to do this. For them. For us. The words came out harder than Marcus intended, sharpened by embarrassment and wounded pride. I can't let you pay for everything. Why not? I have the means. You have the family. We could make this work. Because it makes me feel like I'm not providing for my own kids. The volume startled everyone, including Marcus himself. The girls went quiet. Other people at nearby tables glanced over. Marcus lowered his voice but couldn't soften the edge. I'm their father. I should be able to give them these things. I should be able to take them to Disneyland without my girlfriend. He stopped, realizing he just used that word for the first time, realizing this was not how he wanted to define what they were. Elena's expression shifted. Not hurt exactly, something more complicated. Is that what I am? Your girlfriend? I don't know. What are we doing here, Elena? Really? You make 6 figures. You design buildings that win awards. You could be dating anyone. What do you want with a warehouse manager who can barely afford birthday dinners? The words hung in the air between them. Lily started crying quietly. Violet's face had gone pale. Rose was looking at Marcus with an expression he recognized, the same look she'd given him after Natalie's funeral, when he'd tried to explain that mommy wasn't coming back. Betrayal mixed with fear. Elena stood up. Her voice was controlled but tight. I think we should take this somewhere private. They ended up at a park 3 blocks away, the girls on the playground equipment, while Marcus and Elena sat on a bench far enough away to talk without being overheard. The afternoon was cold, clouds threatening rain. Elena spoke first. My father built Richardson and Associates from nothing. He started as a draftsman, worked his way up. He taught me that money is a tool, not a measure of worth. Marcus stared at his hands. That's easy to say when you have it. You're right, it is. Elena's tone didn't soften. But Brennan had money, lots of it, old Portland family money, the kind that comes with expectations and social obligations, and a complete inability to be honest about what he actually wanted. And you know what? That money didn't make him a better person. It just made him better at hiding who he really was. She turned on the bench to face Marcus directly. I dated him for 3 years. 3 years of pretending his carefully curated life was what I wanted. 3 years of him saying he wanted the same things I did, while secretly planning to convince me otherwise after we got married. And when I found out he'd been lying, You know what hurt most? Not the lie about kids. The lie that he loved me when what he really loved was the idea of me fitting into his life plan. Marcus wanted to interrupt, but Elena wasn't finished. You think I care that you manage a warehouse? You think that matters to me at all? Marcus, you showed me more genuine feeling in one dinner at Romano's than Brennan showed me in 3 years. You let 3 little girls ask a stranger for help because you saw they needed something you couldn't give them alone. You were vulnerable. You were real. And that's worth more than any amount of money. The words should have made Marcus feel better, should have eased the knot of inadequacy that had been tightening in his chest since he Googled Elena's name. Instead, they made him angry. You don't understand. You can afford to think money doesn't matter because you have it. I can't. Every decision I make is about money. Can I afford therapy for the girls? Can I afford to fix the car when it breaks down? Can I afford to take them to the dentist without using the emergency fund? You want to take them to Disneyland? Great, I want to take them too. But I can't. And having you pay for it just highlights that fact. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something sadder. This isn't about Disneyland. This is about you feeling like you failed Natalie. Marcus jerked like he'd been slapped. No, listen to me. You think if you'd made more money, saved more, had better insurance, maybe they would have caught the aneurysm earlier. Maybe she'd still be alive. And now you're punishing yourself by refusing help from anyone because accepting help feels like admitting you weren't enough. The accuracy of it made Marcus's throat close up. He couldn't speak, couldn't look at her. Elena's hand finally bridged the distance between them, resting on his arm. Natalie didn't die because of money. She died because life is unfair and random, and sometimes terrible things happen to people who don't deserve them. And you need to stop carrying that guilt around like it's going to bring her back. Marcus pulled away, stood up. I think we should go home. They compromised on a local amusement park instead of Disneyland, somewhere Marcus could split the cost without feeling completely emasculated. The day was fine, the girls had fun, Elena was patient and kind. Marcus tried to pretend the tension between them had dissolved. But it hadn't. It had just gone underground, waiting. March brought Barbara Thompson to Portland. Marcus's mother descended on the apartment without warning on a Friday evening. He came home from work to find her rental car parked in his spot, her presence filling his small living room like a thunderstorm about to break. Mom, what are you doing here? Barbara Thompson at 65 had the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller. She'd raised 2 boys alone after Marcus's father died of a heart attack when Marcus was 15. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and housed. She'd sacrificed everything, and she expected respect in return. I came to meet this woman you've been spending time with, this Elena. Marcus's stomach sank. How did you? Lily mentioned her when I called last week, said she's been coming over, said she's like a mommy. Barbara's expression was carefully neutral, which was always more dangerous than anger. I thought I should meet someone who's taking on that role in my granddaughters' lives. The evening that followed was excruciating. Marcus called Elena, asked if she could come to dinner. Heard the hesitation in her voice. She knew what this meant, but she agreed. Showed up an hour later in slacks and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back, looking like she was preparing for a job interview rather than a family dinner. Barbara was polite through the meal Marcus threw together. Polite while Elena helped clean up. Polite while the girls showed Elena their latest school projects. But when the girls finally went to bed, the politeness evaporated. She seems nice, Marcus, but isn't this too fast? Marcus kept his voice level. Mom, it's been over 2 years. 2 years since Natalie died. You've known this woman 2 months. Barbara turned to Elena, her tone shifting to something harder. No offense intended, but I need to be direct. You seem like a successful woman, educated, wealthy. What exactly do you want with my son? Elena didn't flinch. I want to build something real with him, with his daughters. Do you? Or are you looking for an instant family because your biological clock is ticking and you've realized you're running out of time? The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus started to protest, but Elena held up a hand, her eyes never leaving Barbara's. Mrs. Thompson, I understand your concern. You don't know me. You see your son, who you love and have protected his entire life, getting involved with a stranger. Of course you're worried. But Barbara's tone made it clear she expected a defense. But your fear doesn't give you the right to question my motives. I lost my sister when I was 12. I know what grief looks like. I know what it means to lose someone you love. And I would never, ever use someone else's loss for my own gain. Barbara stood up. I think I should go back to my hotel. Marcus walked his mother to the door. In the hallway outside his apartment, Barbara turned back. She's from a different world, Marcus. Look at her car. Look at her clothes. Look at the way she carries herself. What happens when she realizes what it's really like? When the novelty wears off and she understands what it means to raise 3 grieving children on a warehouse manager's salary. The words echoed the fears Marcus had been carrying since that first coffee at Powell's. But hearing them spoken aloud by his mother made them feel more real, more inevitable. I need to protect you. And those girls, they've already lost one mother. If this woman leaves, then I'll be there to catch them, like I always have been. Barbara studied her son's face. I hope you know what you're doing. She left. Marcus went back inside to find Elena standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself. I should go too. Elena, no, it's fine. Your mother has a right to be concerned. I am rushing into this. We barely know each other and I'm already playing house with your kids. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is too fast. Marcus crossed the room, stopped just short of touching her. Do you believe that? Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know what I believe anymore. I just know that I'm falling for you, for your daughters. And that terrifies me because what if Rose never accepts me? What if 2 years from now she still resents me? What if I'm setting myself up to fail another little girl who needed me? The reference to Sophie hung between them. Marcus understood then that Elena's fear wasn't really about Rose. It was about not being enough to save someone she loved, about watching another person she cared about slip away. You didn't fail Sophie, didn't I? I couldn't save her, just like I couldn't save my relationship with Brennan. And maybe I can't save this either. She left before Marcus could find the right words to make her stay. 2 weeks passed in uncomfortable silence. Marcus texted twice. Elena responded with polite, distant replies. The girls asked about her constantly. Marcus invented excuses that grew thinner by the day. Lily finally called him out. You're lying, Daddy. You and Elena had a fight. His 6-year-old daughter, who should have been worried about playground dynamics and learning to read, was analyzing his romantic relationship with the perceptiveness of someone 3 times her age. Did you say sorry? Violet wanted to know. It's complicated, baby. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to do the hard thing. Rose spoke without looking up from her drawing. Grandma Natalie used to say, pride is expensive, love is priceless. Marcus stared at his daughter. When had she gotten so wise? And why was she quoting Natalie's favorite saying at him now, after months of resisting Elena? That night, after the girls were asleep, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a pen and paper. He wrote by hand because some things felt too important for text messages. The letter took 3 drafts. The first was too defensive. The second, too apologetic. The third finally captured what he needed to say. That he was scared. That he was wrong to let his pride hurt her. That his mother's words had cut deep because they confirmed his own fears. But that none of that changed the fact that he missed Elena. That the girls missed her. That Rose had spoken her name for the first time in 2 weeks. He drove to Elena's condo in the Pearl District at 11 p.m. The building was the kind of place with a doorman and marble floors and elevator music that didn't offend anyone. He left the letter with the night guard, unable to trust himself to go up to her door. 3 days of silence followed. Marcus convinced himself the letter had been a mistake, that Elena had read it and decided clean breaks were better than messy attempts at reconciliation. Then, on the fourth day, his phone rang at 11:30 at night. Elena's voice was raw. "I got your letter. Can I come over? Right now?" "It's almost midnight. I don't care. I need to see you. I need to see the girls." She arrived 20 minutes later, still in pajama pants and a sweatshirt, her hair wild from sleep. Marcus let her in, suddenly conscious of his own rumpled appearance. "The girls are asleep." "I know. Can I see them anyway? Just for a minute?" Marcus led her to the bedroom the three girls shared. Elena stood in the doorway, watching them sleep, three identical faces peaceful in unconsciousness. When she turned back to Marcus, tears tracked down her face. "I was wrong to pull away, to let my fear make decisions for me." They moved to the living room, keeping their voices low. Elena sat on the couch, pulling her knees up like she was trying to make herself smaller. "After Brennan, I promised myself I wouldn't settle, wouldn't compromise what I wanted. And what I want is children, a family. I want what I should have had with Sophie, to be a big sister, to nurture, to love someone unconditionally." She looked up at Marcus. "Your daughters gave me that chance. They asked me to be brave. And then when your mother questioned me, when you doubted me, I ran. I did exactly what I promised myself I wouldn't do. I let fear win." Marcus sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "I was wrong too. About the money. About projecting my insecurities onto you. About—" he paused, gathering courage. "About assuming you'd leave eventually. Because why wouldn't you? Why would someone like you choose this complicated, messy, difficult life when you could have anything?" Elena reached across the space, taking his hand. "Because anything isn't what I want. I want this. I want you. I want three little girls who asked a stranger to be brave because they were brave enough to ask for help themselves." The kiss happened without either of them planning it. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper as 2 years of Marcus's loneliness and Elena's grief met and recognized each other. When they pulled apart, Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Can we try this again? For real this time?" Yes. They fell asleep on the couch, Marcus's alarm waking them at 6 a.m. when the girls tumbled out of their bedroom and found Elena there. The squeals of excitement were worth the awkward explanation of why Miss Elena was sleeping in the living room. April brought Natalie's birthday. April 28th. She would have been 38. Marcus had been dreading the date for weeks, unsure how to handle it with Elena in their lives now. Unsure if acknowledging his dead wife's birthday was a betrayal of his living girlfriend. Elena solved the problem by asking directly, "What did you do last year for Natalie's birthday?" "The girls and I made her favorite lemon cake, put it by her photo, told stories about her. Then that's what we should do this year." So on April 28th, Elena showed up at their apartment with groceries, lemons, flour, sugar, eggs. She helped the girls make the cake from scratch, listening to their stories about Mommy, about how Natalie used to sing off-key while cooking, about how she couldn't parallel park to save her life, but could quote entire chapters of their favorite books from memory, about how she smelled like vanilla and made the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. Elena didn't try to compete with these memories, didn't try to insert herself into the stories. She just listened, asked questions, honored the woman whose death had created the space she now occupied. They set up the memorial table together. Natalie's photo in the center, surrounded by the cake and white roses, Natalie's favorite flower. The girls added drawings. Elena added a note, handwritten, that she showed to no one. Then they stood in front of the table, Marcus, Elena, and 3 6-year-olds, and Marcus felt for the first time like this might actually work. Like maybe loving Elena didn't mean forgetting Natalie. Like maybe his heart was big enough for both, until Rose opened her mouth. The sound that came out shattered the peaceful moment like a hammer through glass. A scream, a word, the same word that had opened this whole complicated story. No! Elena remained kneeling by the memorial table, one hand still on the roses she'd placed there. Marcus felt the crack in his chest widen. Not the clean break from Natalie's death, but something messier. The complicated fracture of trying to build something new on ground that hadn't finished settling. He looked at Elena, at the woman who had spent the afternoon listening to stories about his dead wife with such grace, and then at the closed door behind which his daughter was sobbing. Lily started crying. Violet joined her. The sound of 3 children in various stages of distress filled the small apartment. Marcus moved toward Rose's room on instinct, but Elena's voice stopped him. "Let me try." "Elena, she just—" "I know what she said. But Marcus, she needs to say it. She needs to know she can push me away and I won't leave." Elena stood, walked to the closed door, knocked gently. "Rose, sweetheart, can I come in?" The answer came muffled through the door. "Go away." Elena didn't. She sat down on the floor outside the bedroom, her back against the wall. Her voice carried the kind of steady calm that came from having survived her own storms. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to sit right here until you're ready to talk, even if that takes all night." Silence from inside. Marcus gathered Lily and Violet, took them to the living room, turned on a movie they'd seen a dozen times. Anything to give them something else to focus on while the real drama unfolded in the hallway. 15 minutes passed. 20. Marcus checked on Elena twice. She waved him away both times, still sitting against that closed door. Then, quietly, the door opened. Rose stood there with tear-stained cheeks and red eyes. Elena didn't move, didn't stand up or reach for the girl, just looked up at her with patient understanding. "I don't want to forget her." Rose's voice came out small and broken. "If I love you, I'll forget Mommy Natalie." Elena spoke carefully, each word chosen with precision. "Rose, honey, love doesn't work that way. Your heart isn't a pie where each slice makes the other smaller. Love grows. The more you love, the more room your heart makes." "But what if—" Rose couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the fear that loving Elena meant betraying Natalie's memory. "Come here." Rose hesitated, then sat down beside Elena on the hallway floor. Elena pulled out her phone, showed Rose a photo. 2 girls, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. "This is Sophie, my little sister. She died when I was 12, and for years I felt guilty every time I was happy." Rose leaned closer to look at the photo. "Did you forget her?" "Never. Not for one day in 18 years. But I learned that Sophie wouldn't want me to stop loving people. She'd want me to say yes when 3 brave girls asked for help." "How do you know?" "Because that's what real love does. It wants the people it loves to be happy, even when it's not there to see it." Rose was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "I was mean to you. I didn't want you here. What if Mommy Natalie is mad at me for letting you stay?" Elena's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "Oh, sweetheart, your mommy loved you so much. And mothers, real mothers, want their children to be loved, even if they can't be the ones doing the loving. Especially then." "How do you know?" "Because I'm starting to love you, all 3 of you. And if something happened to me, I would want someone else to love you just as much. I wouldn't want you to be alone." Rose looked at Elena with those 2 old eyes. "I'm scared." "Me too. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do the thing anyway." The little girl threw herself into Elena's arms so suddenly they both nearly toppled over. Rose sobbed against Elena's shoulder, not the angry tears from earlier, but something deeper, the kind of crying that came from finally letting go of something you'd been holding too tight for too long. Elena held her, rocked her gently, whispered things Marcus couldn't hear from the living room doorway where he stood, watching. When Rose finally pulled back, Her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, but something in her expression had shifted. "Can I call you Mom, Elena? So I can have two moms? Mommy Natalie in heaven and Mom Elena here?" Elena broke. The professional composure she'd maintained through the entire conversation dissolved into tears. She nodded, unable to speak, pulling Rose close again. Marcus turned away to give them privacy, found Lily and Violet standing behind him, having abandoned their movie to witness the moment. Without discussion, all five of them ended up in a pile on the hallway floor. Marcus and Elena and three 6-year-olds who had just learned that hearts could expand to hold more than they thought possible. The next day, Marcus made a call he'd been putting off. Dr. Evelyn Matthews had been recommended by Rose's school counselor when the nightmares had gotten bad 6 months after Natalie died. Marcus had taken the girls once, decided it was too expensive, tried to handle everything himself. Now he realized that had been pride talking. Over the following weeks, they attended therapy twice a week. Dr. Matthews, a woman in her mid-40s with warm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, helped Rose articulate fears she didn't have words for, helped Marcus understand that his daughters needed permission to love again, helped all of them see that honoring Natalie's memory and building a future weren't mutually exclusive. By late May, after their 6th session, Dr. Matthews suggested Elena join them. The therapist's office was in a converted house in Southeast Portland, painted calming blues and greens, filled with toys and books and soft places to sit. Elena arrived early, nervous in a way Marcus had never seen her. Dr. Matthews settled everyone in the family room. She addressed the girls directly. "Today I want you to ask Elena anything you want, any question, no matter how hard. This is your space to be honest." Lily went first, bold as always. "If you marry Daddy, will you have more babies?" Elena didn't hesitate. "I don't know, sweetie. Maybe. Would that bother you?" "No!" Lily's enthusiasm was immediate. "I want a baby brother. I'm tired of being outnumbered by girls." Violet's question came quieter. "What if you get sick like Mommy Natalie? Who will take care of us?" The fear behind the question, that adults could simply disappear without warning, made Elena's voice catch. She recovered quickly. "I hope I'll live a long, long time. But Violet, if something happens, Daddy will be here. And your Grandma Barbara will come. And you'll have each other. You'll never be alone." Rose had been silent through the other questions. Now she looked at Elena with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "Did you say yes to us because you felt sorry for us?" Elena met Rose's gaze without flinching. "No, I said yes because 3 brave little girls reminded me I still had love to give. I thought I was helping you that night at the restaurant, but you saved me." The words hung in the air. Dr. Matthews waited, letting the moment breathe. "Can I call you Mom?" Rose's voice was small but clear. "Not just Mom, Elena, just Mom?" Elena made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She nodded, words failing her. Rose climbed into her lap and Elena held her like she might never let go. Marcus watched his daughter, the one who had resisted longest, who had protected her heart most fiercely, finally surrender to the possibility of being loved again. He watched Elena close her eyes and breathe in the scent of Rose's hair like she was memorizing the moment, and he knew with absolute certainty what he needed to do. That evening, after Elena left and the girls were asleep, Marcus called his brother. Owen Thompson had moved to Seattle for work 5 years ago, established himself as a software engineer, built the kind of stable life Marcus had always envied. They spoke every few weeks, usually about their mother, occasionally about Marcus's struggles with single parenthood. "I'm going to ask Elena to marry me." Owen was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "Mom is going to lose her mind." "I know. She already came here once in March, tried to talk me out of dating Elena, said she's from a different world. That when the novelty wears off, Elena will realize she doesn't want this life." "Do you believe that?" Marcus thought about Elena sitting on his hallway floor, waiting for Rose to open the door. About therapy sessions she attended without being asked, and the way she'd learned to make Natalie's lemon cake from scratch, even though baking wasn't her thing. No, I believe she loves us, and I love her. And I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. Then ask her. Mom will come around eventually. She just needs time. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in mid-June, Marcus proposed at the same park bench where they'd had their first fight about money. The ring was modest. He'd saved for 3 months, asked Owen to help him pick something Elena would actually like, rather than something expensive. Elena said yes before he could finish the question, tears streaming down her face, not even looking at the ring until after she'd kissed him. But time was something Barbara Thompson didn't seem interested in giving. When Marcus called to tell his mother about the engagement, not to ask permission, but to inform her, the conversation went exactly as badly as he'd feared. Marcus, this is a mistake. Mom, you've known her 6 months. That's not long enough to make this kind of decision. It's been long enough for her to become part of our family, long enough for the girls to love her, long enough for me to know what I want. Barbara's voice went tight. And what about what I want? I'm their grandmother. Don't I get a say in who you bring into their lives permanently? You get to have an opinion. You don't get to make my choices for me. The silence on the other end felt dangerous. When Barbara spoke again, her words came out slow and deliberate. If you marry her, Marcus, I don't know if I can be part of this. The ultimatum landed like a punch. Marcus understood what his mother was really saying. Choose between the woman he loved and the woman who had raised him. Between his future and his past. Between guilt and hope. Then I guess you're choosing to leave, Mom, because I'm choosing Elena. He hung up before Barbara could respond, sat at his kitchen table with his head in his hands, and tried not to think about the fact that he might be losing his mother the same year he'd found Elena. Summer passed in the complicated dance of wedding planning, while pretending his mother's absence didn't hurt. Elena's father offered to pay for everything. Richardson money could make the wedding elaborate, but Marcus and Elena compromised on something smaller. His backyard. 50 guests, simple and real, rather than expensive and performative. The girls' teacher sent an email in October. Mrs. Patterson taught second grade at Rigler Elementary, a small school in Northeast Portland where the Thompson triplets had started first grade the year after Natalie died. She was young, enthusiastic, the kind of teacher who genuinely cared about her students beyond test scores. Dear Mr. Thompson, I wanted to let you know about a special assignment. We're having the children write about a moment that changed my life. Lily, Rose, and Violet have all chosen to write about the night they met Elena. The essays are beautiful, and I'd love your permission to submit them to a national contest for young writers. Marcus showed the email to Elena that evening. She read it twice, her expression unreadable. What do they say? The essays? I don't know. Mrs. Patterson said she wanted to ask permission first. They requested copies. Mrs. Patterson sent PDFs the next day. Marcus and Elena read them together on his couch after the girls were asleep. Lily's essay was titled, The Day I Was Brave. She wrote about being scared to approach a stranger, but doing it anyway because Daddy needed help. About how sometimes the scariest things turn out to be the best things. Violet's essay focused on family. Before, we were 4 people pretending to be okay. Now we're 5 people who don't have to pretend. Rose's essay made both adults cry. She'd written about fear, about being afraid to love someone new because loving someone meant they could leave. But then she'd written, Mom Elena taught me that love doesn't make your heart smaller by dividing it. Love makes your heart bigger by multiplying it. Elena closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling. They're going to share our story with the whole country. Is that okay? I don't know, it feels private, like something that belongs to just us. Marcus understood, but he also understood something else. What if there's another dad out there eating birthday cake alone? Or another woman sitting in a restaurant trying to decide if she's brave enough to start over? What if our story helps someone? Elena was quiet for a long time. Then, okay, let's share it. Mrs. Patterson submitted the essays in November. The contest results came back in December. All three girls had won first place in their age division. The national coordinator wanted to interview the family. A journalist from the Portland Herald had heard about the story and wanted to write a feature. The article ran on a Sunday in January, 1 year and 1 week after that first dinner at Romano's. The headline read, "Three Sisters, One Wish, How a Birthday Dinner Became a Second Chance at Love." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The online version got 500,000 shares in the first week. Good Morning America called requesting an interview. Letters arrived at their apartment by the dozens, forwarded by the Herald from readers who wanted to share their own stories. Marcus sat at his kitchen table reading them aloud to Elena while the girls played in the next room. Letters from widowers who'd been alone for years, saying the story gave them courage to try again. From single mothers terrified of dating with children, inspired by Elena's willingness to love someone else's kids. From people who'd lost siblings, parents, friends, all saying variations of the same thing. Your story reminded me I could love again. One letter came in a handwritten envelope with a Seattle postmark dated early February, 1 month after the article ran. Marcus recognized his mother's handwriting before he opened it. Barbara's letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, tear-stained in places. She'd read Rose's essay 17 times, she wrote, had finally understood that loving Elena didn't erase Natalie, that Marcus's daughters were wise enough to hold both mothers in their hearts, and she'd been foolish to think adults couldn't do the same. I was wrong to oppose your marriage, wrong to question Elena's motives, wrong to let my fear of losing you keep me from supporting you. The truth is, when Natalie died, I felt like I lost a daughter. And when you started dating Elena, I felt like accepting her meant betraying Natalie's memory. But Rose taught me something in her essay. She wrote that hearts are big enough for two mothers. And if a 7-year-old can understand that, I should be able to as well. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I love you all. Please let me come to the wedding. Mom. Marcus called his mother that night. They both cried. Bonjour promised to come to the wedding in June. Asked if there was still time to help plan it. Over the next 4 months, she called weekly, slowly rebuilding what her fear had nearly destroyed. They talked about flowers and music and whether the girls should all wear matching dresses or let them choose their own. Small conversations that rebuilt trust, one sentence at a time. The wedding happened on a perfect June afternoon in Marcus's backyard, 18 months after that first dinner at Romano's. 18 months of learning to love again, to trust again, to believe that broken things could be made whole, even if the cracks still showed. 50 people sat in white folding chairs arranged in rows on the grass. Marcus's brother Owen stood as best man. The front row held an empty seat, Barbara's seat, though she'd promised to be there by 2 p.m., and it was now 2:15. The triplets wore matching white dresses and carried white roses, Natalie's favorite flower, at Elena's insistence. A small table sat at the front with 2 photographs in matching silver frames. Natalie, laughing at something off camera. Sophie, 10 years old and full of life. The people who had brought them here, honored rather than hidden. Reverend Michael Harris from the neighborhood community church officiated. He was 70, with a voice that carried the weight of having presided over both too many funerals and not enough weddings. He'd married Marcus and Natalie 14 years ago, had presided over Natalie's funeral. Now he stood ready to help Marcus begin again. But before the ceremony could start, before Elena could even walk down the makeshift aisle, a silver BMW pulled up outside. A man in an expensive suit climbed out, looking uncertain and out of place. Marcus recognized him from photos Elena kept in a box she thought no one knew about. Brennan Whitmore, the ex-fiancé, the man who had lied about wanting children, who had broken Elena's heart 3 days before 3 little girls had helped put it back together. Marcus moved to intercept, but Elena was faster. She walked over to Brennan, her wedding dress, simple white, nothing elaborate, moving around her legs like water. They spoke too quietly for Marcus to hear. Brennan handed Elena an envelope. She opened it, read whatever was inside, and her hand went to her mouth. Then she hugged Brennan, brief, final, and he left. Elena came back holding the envelope like it was something precious. Her eyes were red, but her smile was genuine. What was that about? Later, right now, I need to marry you. The ceremony began. Canon in D played on a borrowed speaker. Elena walked down the grass aisle with her father, a man in his 70s who had built Richardson and Associates from nothing and who looked at Marcus with the kind of assessment only fathers could give. But when he placed Elena's hand in Marcus's, he smiled. The vows came. Marcus had written his on the back of grocery receipts during lunch breaks at work, refined them a dozen times, memorized them until they felt like truth rather than words. Elena, 2 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never smile again, never love again, never feel whole again. Then 3 little girls did the bravest thing they've ever done. They asked a stranger for help, and that stranger, you, said yes. You didn't just say yes to them, you said yes to me, to our grief, to our mess, to loving people who were broken. You taught me that endings don't have to be final, that love doesn't subtract, it multiplies, that I can honor Natalie's memory and build a future with you at the same time. I promise to love you fiercely, to let you help me when I'm too proud to ask, to honor Sophie's memory the way you honor Natalie's. And I promise that every day I'll choose you, just like you chose us. Elena's turn. She'd written hers the night before, unable to sleep, finally putting into words what she'd been feeling since 3 6-year-olds had walked up to her table at Romano's. Marcus, Lily, Rose, Violet, I didn't know I was broken until you made me whole again. 18 years ago, I lost my sister. I thought I'd never get to be someone's big sister again, but you 3 gave me that gift. Marcus, you taught me that being scared and brave at the same time is possible. I can't replace Natalie. I would never try, but I promise to love these girls the way she would have wanted them to be loved. I promise to tell them stories about her so they never forget. And I promise to build new memories with them so they know it's okay to move forward. I choose you. I choose this family. I choose love over fear every single day. Reverend Harris pronounced them husband and wife. The kiss was chaste, children watching, but real. 50 people started to applaud. Then a car door slammed. Everyone turned. Barbara Thompson was running across the lawn, out of breath, her dress disheveled like she'd thrown it on in a hurry. Her flight from Seattle had been delayed 3 hours, mechanical issues, and traffic from the airport had been a nightmare. She'd called Marcus twice from the cab, crying, certain she'd miss her only son's wedding. Wait, I'm sorry. Marcus, Elena, girls, I'm so sorry I'm late. Lily, Rose, and Violet broke formation and ran to their grandmother. Barbara dropped to her knees, hugging all 3 at once, crying so hard she could barely speak. Then she stood, walked to Marcus first. I was wrong, son, so wrong. Can you forgive me? Marcus pulled his mother into a hug that felt like coming home. You're here. That's all that matters. Barbara turned to Elena, extended her hand, then thought better of it and opened her arms instead. Welcome to the family, daughter. The reception lasted until evening. Marcus watched Elena dance with his brother, saw Barbara helping the girls with cake that was getting everywhere, noticed the way the sun set golden over Portland and made everything look softer. He thought about Natalie, about how she would have liked Elena, how she would have been happy that their girls had found someone brave enough to love them. Later that night, after the guests had left and the girls were finally asleep, Marcus and Elena sat on their back porch, wrapped in a blanket against the June evening chill. Can I see the letter now? From Brennan? Elena pulled the envelope from where she tucked it into her bouquet. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Dear Elena, I was at Romano's that night, the night you met Marcus. I was 2 tables away with my mother. We've been fighting about my choices. about the lies I'd told you. I saw three little girls approach you, heard what they asked, watched you say yes, and something in me broke. I called you that night, told you I couldn't meet you, but the truth is I couldn't face you because I just realized what I'd lost. Watching you with that family, seeing the courage it took to say yes to love when you'd been so hurt, I understood that I'd thrown away the best thing in my life. I've been in therapy for 18 months. I'm dating someone new who has 2 kids. I'm trying to be the man you deserved. Thank you for leaving me. Thank you for being brave. Congratulations. Brennan. P.S. My mother asked me to tell you she was there that night too, watching. And your courage helped her reach out to me the next day. We're still working on our relationship, but we're trying. Thank you for that. Elena folded the letter carefully. Brennan's mother was there. We changed her life and didn't even know it. Marcus understood then what they'd done. Not just built a family from broken pieces, but created ripples that spread farther than they could see. How many other people had been at Romano's that night? How many had watched 3 little girls ask a stranger for help and thought about their own lives, their own fears, their own capacity for courage? You know what your daughters taught me? Elena's voice was quiet in the darkness. That asking for help isn't weakness. That saying yes to strangers can change everything. That love doesn't run out, it just grows. 8 years passed. The kind of years that build lives rather than just marking time. Lily, Rose, and Violet turned 14, somehow still identical but increasingly individual. Lily became the reader, always with a book, always asking why. Violet became the artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings of people and places and dreams. Rose became the quiet leader, the one her sisters turned to, the one who remembered that hearts could hold more than one love. Barbara visited monthly from Seattle, had reconciled not just with Marcus but with the idea that Elena belonged in this family. Called Elena daughter without hesitation. Marcus got promoted 18 months after the wedding, warehouse manager to operations coordinator. Better title, better pay, though still nowhere near what Elena made. But they'd learned to navigate that gap, to see money as a tool rather than a measurement. Elena still designed community centers and libraries, still created spaces where people could feel less alone. And on a January evening, exactly 8 years after that first dinner, they all went back to Romano's. The same restaurant, the same table, though it now needed to accommodate 7 instead of 4. Marcus at 46, Elena at 38, Lily, Rose, and Violet at 14, Barbara at 73, and Leonardo Sophie Thompson Richardson, 2 years old, named for Elena's lost sister and with Natalie's eyes. The waiter who brought their menus was the same college kid from 8 years ago, now 30-something, established, remembering them immediately. Mr. Thompson, I remember when you used to come here, that first birthday, you looked so lost. Marcus smiled at the memory. 3 little girls changed everything. After dinner, after the birthday cake and the candles, in the chaos of a toddler who wanted to blow out Daddy's candles himself, they sat around the table full of the evidence that broken things could heal, that families could be built rather than just born, that love was always worth the risk. Rose, 14 and wise, asked the question, Dad, do you remember what you wished for 8 years ago? I wished for the courage to imagine a future. Did it come true? Marcus looked around the table, at his daughters who had been brave enough to ask a stranger for help when their father couldn't, at Elena, who had been brave enough to say yes, at his mother, who had been brave enough to admit she was wrong, at the baby who represented everything he'd thought impossible, new life, new love, new beginnings. Beyond my wildest dreams, Leo clapped his chubby hands. Cake! Everyone laughed. Marcus closed his eyes over the candles, 38 of them this year, 1 for each year, plus extras that Leo had insisted on, and made his wish. Not for the impossible past, not for what was lost, But for everyone sitting alone tonight, in restaurants or homes or quiet, desperate places, wondering if they'd ever feel whole again, he wished them three brave children, one stranger willing to say yes, the courage to believe that sometimes pretending is the first step towards something real. He wished them what his daughters had taught him, that the best kind of courage doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, asks the hard question, says yes when logic says no. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it changes everything.